The acid rain on Vexus 9 could melt through standard-issue colony gear in less than 20 minutes. Elias Frost knew this better than most, having spent 3 years drifting between the scattered settlements of this harsh frontier world. He pulled his weatherproof jacket tighter around his shoulders as the warning sirens began to wail, signaling another deadly downpour. Just perfect, he muttered, quickening his pace along the bazaar's emptying streets. Merchants frantically packed up their wares, protective shields whirring to life over permanent structures. The foreign quarter of Port Nexus wasn't known for its infrastructure. Those caught without shelter here often ended up in medical pods for skin grafts, if they were lucky. Elias had almost reached the relative safety of his rented hab unit when he spotted her, a slender figure huddled beneath a damaged awning, arms wrapped around herself as the first caustic droplets began to fall. Even from a distance, he could tell she wasn't human, her iridescent blue skin marking her as Azuran, the dominant species in this sector. Her clothing was oddly simple for one of her kind, lacking the characteristic protective layers Azurans typically wore off-world. He hesitated only a moment. 3 more minutes to his door, or... "Hey," he called out, changing direction and jogging toward her. "That awning won't hold." As he drew closer, he saw her trembling, whether from fear or the pain of acid droplets already seeping through the damaged covering. Her eyes, all pupil, deep violet with flecks of silver, widened at his approach. "Here," Elias said, shrugging off his jacket. "Take this. It's rated for full exposure." "I cannot," she began, her voice melodic despite the obvious distress. "You can and you will," he interrupted, draping the protective garment around her shoulders. "I'm closer to shelter than you are." He glanced up at the deteriorating awning. "And that thing's about to give way completely." The Azuran woman clutched the edges of the jacket, studying his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Why would you help me? You don't know who I am." Elias gave a half-smile. "Does it matter? Come on, we need to get you somewhere safe until this passes." A resonant boom echoed through the marketplace as dropships appeared overhead, cutting through the darkening sky with searchlights. Before Elias could process what was happening, 6 armored figures descended on jump jets, landing in a perfect circle around them. Their armor bore insignias he'd only seen in newscasts, the royal crest of the Azuran Empire. "Step away from her radiance," the lead guard commanded, weapon raised. Elias raised his hand slowly. "Look, I was just helping." He fell silent as all 6 guards dropped to one knee, heads bowed. "Crown Empress Talia," the leader intoned. "The palace is in uproar. Are you harmed?" "Empress." Elias felt the blood drain from his face as he looked again at the woman now standing straighter, her bearing suddenly regal despite the borrowed jacket still hanging from her shoulders. "I am unharmed," she replied, her voice carrying unexpected authority. "Thanks only to this man's intervention." She gestured toward Elias with a graceful hand. He offered protection while everyone else fled. The guard commander's helmet turned toward Elias, scanning him. "A human drifter, your radiance." Colony records identify him as Elias Frost, no fixed employment, arrived on Vexus 9 3 standard years ago. "Then Elias Frost has my gratitude," the Empress said, her eyes never leaving his increasingly bewildered face. "And my protection." "Your radiance," another guard stepped forward, "the acid storm intensifies. We must return you to the palace immediately." "Yes," she agreed, "and he comes with us." "That's really not necessary," Elias began to protest. "It is necessary," Empress Talia cut him off with surprising firmness. "You've lost your protective gear because of me. Besides," she added with the ghost of a smile, "I believe this conversation requires a more appropriate setting." Before he could object further, 2 guards flanked him while another produced a protective field generator that enveloped their group in a shimmering bubble. The acid rain sizzled against the energy barrier as they were escorted to the waiting dropship. As they ascended above the storm clouds, Elias gazed out at the sprawling imperial palace in the distance, a structure he'd only ever glimpsed from afar, iridescent spires reaching toward the twin moons of Vexus 9. "I don't understand," he finally said, turning to the woman who was apparently the most powerful figure in this sector of the galaxy. "Why were you out there alone? Without protection?" Empress Talia's eyes held a mixture of weariness and defiance as she answered, "Sometimes, Elias Frost, a cage made of gold is still a cage." The dropship banked toward the palace, and Elias realized his simple life as a drifter had just become extraordinarily complicated. The imperial palace of Vexus 9 gleamed like a massive crystal formation, its azure spires stretching toward the sky. Inside, Elias found himself in a high-ceilinged chamber surrounded by agitated Azuran officials. Their skin displayed varying shades of blue, from pale aquamarine to deep cobalt, a trait he'd learned indicated lineage and status. "This is unprecedented, Your Radiance," announced High Counselor Davin, his skin shimmering with anger. Vanishing during a state function only to be found with this, human. Empress Talia had changed into formal attire, a flowing garment that seemed to capture and refract light. Yet she still clutched Elias's weatherproof jacket in one hand, refusing to relinquish it despite attendants' attempts. "I grew weary of smiling at ambassadors who seek only advantage," she replied coolly. "I wanted to see my city without filters or escorts. And nearly died for the privilege." Davin's voice reverberated. "If not for this drifter." "His name is Elias Frost," she interrupted. "And you will address him with respect." Elias shifted uncomfortably. The chamber floor was inlaid with luminescent stone that responded to pressure, creating ripples of light beneath his feet. Everything about this place screamed wealth and power, things he'd deliberately avoided his entire adult life. "Your Radiance," he spoke up, "I appreciate the rescue from the storm, but I should return too." "You have nowhere pressing to be," Talia stated, not a question but a fact. "Your contract at the spaceport loading docks ended 3 days ago. You haven't secured new employment." Elias blinked. "You checked my work record." "I had you thoroughly investigated during our transit," she confirmed. "Standard security protocol." An elegant Azuran woman with teal markings stepped forward. "Perhaps our guest requires rest and refreshment after his ordeal." "I am Vesa, Royal Chamberlain." "Yes, show him to the East Wing," Talia commanded. "The Starlight Suite." Gasps erupted around the chamber. "Your Radiance," protested Davin, "those quarters are reserved for visiting dignitaries." "And now they will house my honored guest," she replied with finality. Before Elias could protest further, she added, "We will speak privately tomorrow, Elias Frost. I owe you a proper explanation." As Vesa led him through labyrinthine corridors, Elias whispered, "What's happening here? Why am I really being kept?" The Chamberlain gave him a measured look. "In 300 years, Crown Empress Talia is the first to escape her guards and walk among common people. She is also the first to return with a human companion." "I'm not her companion," Elias clarified quickly. "Perhaps not yet," Vesa replied cryptically. "But you showed kindness without knowing her station. That is, unusual in her Radiance's experience." The Starlight Suite proved to be larger than any dwelling Elias had occupied in years. Through transparent ceiling panels, Vexus 9's twin moons cast silvery light across luxurious furnishings. After a meal that featured delicacies from across the galaxy, Elias found himself restless, pacing the extravagant prison he now occupied. Near midnight, the door whispered open. Empress Talia entered, having exchanged her formal attire for simpler clothing. "Your guards let you wander alone?" Elias asked, surprised. "They've been instructed to give me space when I visit you," she explained. "Though they're certainly monitoring from a distance." She approached the window, gazing at the cityscape below. "I've been Empress for 2 years. Before that, I was sheltered, protected, trained for duty. I've never experienced freedom." "So you escaped?" She nodded. "I wanted to feel the city's pulse, see unfiltered reactions, hear unguarded words. Then the storm came. And now I'm here because you saw me, not my title, not my value as a political prize," she said, turning to face him. "Do you know how rare that is?" Elias noticed her hand still clutched his jacket. "You can keep that if you want," he offered with a small smile. "I intended to," she replied with unexpected warmth. "It reminds me of a moment of genuine connection." She stepped closer. "My advisors are furious. They see you as a complication, a security risk. Some are already spreading rumors about why I've kept you here." "Why have you?" Elias asked, suddenly aware of how close she stood. "Because I want to understand what freedom feels like," Talia whispered. "And you, Elias Frost, are the freest person I've ever met." Days stretched into weeks. Initially, Elias was summoned daily to advise the Empress on matters concerning common citizens, a transparent excuse to keep him close. But these meetings evolved into something neither expected. "You're suggesting I open the palace gardens to the public?" Talia asked incredulously during one session. "Just one day monthly," Elias clarified. "It would change how people see the monarchy. Right now, you're just an image on currency, not a person." They sat in her private study, surrounded by ancient texts and holographic displays. Over time, he'd grown accustomed to her presence, her thoughtful pauses, her subtle humor, the way her skin luminescence brightened when she was passionate about a topic. "The security implications alone," her advisor Calvin began. "Can be managed," Talia finished. "Implement Elias's suggestion. Begin preparations immediately." Calvin bowed stiffly and departed, disapproval radiating from his rigid posture. "You're making enemies for me," Elias observed once they were alone. "I'm making enemies for myself," she corrected. "You're simply a convenient target for their frustration." She rose, moving to a window overlooking the Capitol. "Walk with me. The southern gardens are beautiful at sunset." Their walks became regular occurrences. Under the crimson light of dusk, they wandered among exotic flora from across the galaxy. Talia revealed the burdens of her position, the constant political maneuvering, the endless responsibilities, the isolation. "I was 7 when they separated me from my family," she confessed one evening. "Emperors and empresses must be untainted by familial bias," they said. "I was raised by tutors and advisors, trained to rule without personal attachments." "That's barbaric," Elias said, anger coloring his voice. "It's tradition," she replied softly. "One I've begun questioning since meeting you." As weeks passed, Elias found himself caught between worlds, still treated with suspicion by palace officials, yet growing increasingly essential to Talia's daily life. When he mentioned leaving, her expression darkened. "Is your freedom worth more than the good you're doing here?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her imperial facade. The truth was more complicated than freedom. Elias found himself drawn to her intelligence, her quiet strength, her determination to be more than her title. The realization terrified him. Meanwhile, across the palace, whispers intensified. Surveillance footage of their garden walks, analyzed for every glance and gesture, circulated among concerned officials. Counselor Davin convened secret meetings with off-world representatives. "The Empress appears infatuated with this human," he told a gathering of trusted allies. "Such a connection threatens centuries of tradition." "Perhaps the human could have an unfortunate accident," suggested a representative from a neighboring system. "No," Davin countered. "She would suspect. We must be more subtle." Unaware of these machinations, Elias and Talia continued their daily walks. One evening, as they paused beneath a tree with luminescent leaves, their hands brushed accidentally. Neither pulled away. "In all my life," Talia said quietly, "you're the first person who doesn't treat me like I might shatter, or like I'm something to be used." Elias looked down at their joined hands, 5 fingers interlaced with 5 fingers, different in color but identical in form. "I'm starting to think," he admitted, "that drifting brought me here for a reason." The public garden opening occurred exactly 1 month after Elias's arrival at the palace. Security was unprecedented, guards stationed throughout, scanners monitoring every visitor. Despite the precautions, people came by the thousands, eager for a glimpse of their mysterious empress. Elias watched from a balcony as Talia moved among her subjects, her guards maintaining a respectful distance as she had commanded. Her face glowed with genuine pleasure at the citizens' reactions to her presence. "Your idea is a remarkable success," Vesa commented, joining him. "Perhaps the first time in generations an empress has been cheered rather than merely bowed to." "She's a natural," Elias replied. "People respond to authenticity." "Indeed they do," Vesa observed, studying him intently. "Which is why her affection for you causes such concern." Before Elias could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the eastern perimeter. Screams erupted as smoke billowed from the gardens. Without thinking, he raced toward the stairs, heart pounding. "Elias, wait!" Vesa called after him. "The guards will protect her." But he was already running, pushing through panicked crowds toward the epicenter of chaos. Security forces scrambled to establish a perimeter as another explosion hit, closer to where he'd last seen Talia. Through smoke and debris, he spotted her, surrounded by guards but clearly refusing to leave while civilians remained in danger. The determination on her face made his heart contract painfully. "Empress," he shouted, fighting against the crowd. A masked figure appeared behind her security detail, raising an energy weapon. Elias lunged forward, tackling the would-be assassin just as the weapon discharged. Searing pain tore through his shoulder, but he managed to knock the attacker off balance. Guards swarmed, subduing the assailant. Talia broke through their formation, dropping to her knees beside Elias. "You fool," she whispered, voice trembling as she pressed her hand against his wound. "You beautiful, reckless fool." The world blurred as medical technicians rushed forward. Through the haze of pain, he heard her commanding voice, "He receives the same care you would give me. That's an imperial decree." He awoke in a medical chamber, advanced technology accelerating his healing. Talia sat beside him, still wearing her ceremonial robes, now stained with his blood. "The separatists have been apprehended," she informed him. "They hope to destabilize the Empire by attacking during a public event." "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately. "No thanks to your recklessness," she replied, trying to sound stern but failing as her voice caught. "You could have died." "Worth the risk," he murmured. Something broke in her expression then, the careful control she maintained fracturing. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. "I cannot lose you," she whispered. "I won't." Their first kiss was gentle, cautious, a crossing of boundaries both physical and political. When they separated, Elias saw tears glistening in her eyes. "This complicates things," he said softly. "Things were already complicated," she replied, taking his hand. "Now they're just honest." News of the attack, and the human who shielded the Empress, spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Diplomatic communiques flooded in, demanding explanations. Conservative factions within the Empire threatened open rebellion against what they termed contamination of the royal bloodline. Talia faced the High Council the following day, Elias at her side despite medical advice to rest. "You cannot pursue this relationship," Councillor Davin declared. "The political consequences are too severe." "I am not asking permission," Talia responded, her voice steady. "I am informing you of my decision. The Empire will adapt." The Great Hall of the Imperial Palace buzzed with representatives from across the galaxy. 3 months had passed since the assassination attempt, and Talia had called for an unprecedented gathering of all planetary governors and ambassadors. Elias stood slightly behind her throne, his position ambiguous but his presence undeniable. His shoulder had healed, though the energy weapon had left a starburst scar, a permanent reminder of that fateful day. "For centuries," Talia began, her voice carrying through the vast chamber, "the Azuran Empire has maintained stability through isolation of its rulers. We were taught that detachment ensures impartiality, that separation ensures strength." She rose, moving forward to stand closer to the assembled dignitaries. "I reject these premises. My experiences have shown me that true strength comes from connection, not isolation. True wisdom from understanding, not detachment." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elias noticed Davin and his allies exchanging dark glances. "Therefore, I am implementing comprehensive reforms. The imperial education system will be restructured, future rulers will no longer be separated from family. The palace will open regularly to citizens. And imperial advisors will include representatives from all social strata, not merely the elite." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "Additionally, I am establishing a new position, Imperial Liaison to Colonial Territories. This person will ensure the needs of our frontier worlds are no longer ignored." Her eyes found Elias, and she extended her hand. "I have appointed Elias Frost to this position, with full diplomatic authority." The hall erupted into chaos. Shouts of protest mingled with expressions of support. Elias stepped forward, taking her outstretched hand. "You didn't warn me," he whispered. "Would you have agreed if I had?" she replied with a small smile. "Probably not." "Then I made the right decision." As the tumult continued around them, Talia raised her voice once more. "I understand these changes challenge centuries of tradition. But traditions that isolate rulers from those they govern deserve to be challenged." Gradually, the noise subsided. An elderly governor rose slowly from her seat. "Your Radiance," she said, her voice weathered but strong, "I remember your grandmother's reign. She was respected but never beloved. You have potential to be both." Others began to voice support, particularly representatives from frontier worlds who had long felt neglected by the central government. Later that evening, Elias and Talia stood on the palace's highest balcony, watching as the twin moons rose over the capital. "You realize this won't be easy," he said, arm around her waist. "There will be resistance, maybe even more attempts to stop us." "Nothing worthwhile is ever easy," she replied, leaning against him. "But I've spent my entire life preparing for difficult decisions." "And this?" he asked, gesturing between them. "Us. Is this a difficult decision?" Talia turned to face him fully, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "No," she said simply. "Loving you is the easiest decision I've ever made. Everything else, the politics, the traditions, the expectations, that's the difficult part. I'm still getting used to the idea that I went from drifter to imperial advisor," Elias admitted. "I'm not sure I'm qualified." "You're qualified because you see what others miss," she said. "You see people, not positions. You saw me, not an empress." Below them, the city stretched out in all directions, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. A gentle acid rain began to fall, dissolving harmlessly against the palace's protective shields. "I never returned your jacket," Talia said suddenly. Elias laughed. "Keep it. It's a good reminder of where we started. A human drifter and an alien empress," she mused. "Meeting in an acid rainstorm. No one would believe this story. Yet here we are," he replied, drawing her closer. "Writing our own ending." "Not an ending," Talia corrected, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "A beginning." Above them, the stars of Vexus 9 shone brilliantly, witnesses to an unlikely love that would reshape an empire.